The discovery happened by accident on a Tuesday evening in December, when Ronaldo returned to the barber shop to retrieve his wallet that he had left behind after his appointment earlier that day. And when he used his key to enter the small establishment where he had been getting his hair cut for 5 years, he found not an empty shop, but a carefully arranged living space where his barber had set up a mattress behind the styling chairs, his personal belongings organized in neat piles that revealed someone who was maintaining dignity and order despite circumstances that had forced him to transform his place of work into his home because he could no longer afford both rent for the shop and rent for an apartment that would allow him to separate his professional and personal lives in the way that most people took for granted. The barber's name was Miguel Santos, a 58-year-old man who had been cutting hair for 35 years and who had built a loyal clientele through skill, discretion, and the kind of old-fashioned customer service that was becoming rare in an industry increasingly dominated by chain salons and quick-service establishments that prioritized efficiency over the personal relationships that had made neighborhood barbershops important community gathering places where men could relax, socialize, and receive services that went beyond simple grooming to include informal counseling and social connection that many customers valued as much as the haircuts themselves. Miguel had been Ronaldo's barber since 2018, recommended by a teammate who appreciated Miguel's ability to maintain confidentiality about his clients' personal lives while providing consistently excellent service in an environment where privacy was protected and conversations remained within the shop's walls. And over the years, their relationship had evolved from purely professional to something approaching friendship, with Miguel sharing stories about his family, his dreams of eventually expanding his business, and his pride in serving clients who trusted him with their appearance and their privacy during a time when both were increasingly valuable commodities for public figures who needed services they could rely on without worrying about invasion of privacy or betrayal of confidences. The financial problems that had led to Miguel sleeping in his shop had begun 18 months earlier when his landlord had doubled the rent on his apartment, forcing him to choose between maintaining his home and maintaining his business. And when he had calculated that keeping the barbershop open was essential for preserving the livelihood that supported not just himself, but also his elderly mother, whose medical expenses required steady income that would be impossible to replace if he lost the client base that had taken decades to build, he had made the difficult decision to give up his apartment and convert his shop into a makeshift residence that allowed him to continue working while drastically reducing his living expenses. Miguel's living arrangements were carefully hidden from his clients, who had no idea that their barber was sleeping on a mattress that he rolled up each morning and stored behind the supply cabinet, that he was showering at a nearby gym where he maintained a membership specifically for access to bathroom facilities, and that he was preparing simple meals on a hot plate that he kept in the back room, along with a small refrigerator that contained enough food for basic nutrition, but nothing that could be described as comfortable or adequate for someone his age who deserved better housing than what he had been forced to accept due to economic circumstances beyond his control. The conversation that followed Ronaldo's discovery was initially awkward and embarrassing for Miguel, who had spent months carefully concealing his living situation from everyone who knew him, because he feared that admitting his circumstances would damage his professional reputation and potentially cost him clients who might question his stability or reliability if they knew he was homeless. But Ronaldo's response was immediate concern rather than judgment, and his questions focused on understanding Miguel's situation rather than expressing shock or pity that would have made an already difficult conversation even more uncomfortable for someone whose pride had already been damaged by circumstances that had forced him to live in ways that contradicted his professional image and personal dignity. Miguel's explanation of his financial circumstances revealed the broader economic pressures facing small business owners, whose expenses were increasing faster than their revenue, particularly independent service providers, whose income was limited by the number of hours they could work and the prices they could charge in competitive markets, where customers had numerous alternatives that often competed on price rather than quality or personal service. And his story illustrated how quickly stable middle-class lives could be disrupted by rent increases, medical expenses, or other unexpected costs that exceeded the modest savings that most working people accumulated during years of steady but limited income. The immediate solution that Ronaldo provided was straightforward but comprehensive, involving not just assistance with apartment deposits and moving expenses, but also a business loan that would allow Miguel to relocate his shop to a larger space with better terms and potentially hire additional staff that could increase revenue while reducing his personal workload. And when Miguel initially protested that he couldn't accept such generous help from a client, Ronaldo explained that their relationship had evolved beyond the traditional barber-customer dynamic, and that helping someone who had provided years of reliable service was not charity, but recognition of Miguel's value as both a professional and a person who deserved stable housing and economic security. The new barbershop that opened 6 months later was everything Miguel had dreamed of during years of working in cramped quarters while sleeping behind his styling chairs. A modern facility with multiple chairs, updated equipment, and separate spaces for different services that allowed him to expand his offerings while maintaining the personal atmosphere that had made his original shop successful. And the increased revenue from the larger space and additional services provided financial stability that eliminated the constant stress that had been affecting his health and his ability to focus on providing the quality service that his clients expected and deserved. The apartment that Miguel moved into was modest but comfortable, a 2-bedroom place that allowed him to host his mother for visits and to entertain friends in ways that had been impossible when he was living secretly in his workplace. And the separation of his professional and personal spaces restored a sense of normalcy that improved his mental health and allowed him to approach his work with renewed energy and enthusiasm that his clients immediately noticed and appreciated. The employees that Miguel hired included 2 younger barbers who were struggling to establish themselves in a competitive industry where experience was valued, but opportunities for gaining that experience were limited. And his mentorship of these aspiring professionals created a positive workplace culture that attracted additional clients, while providing training and support that helped the next generation of barbers develop skills and build careers that could provide stable income and professional satisfaction in an industry that Miguel had always loved, despite the economic challenges that had temporarily threatened his ability to continue working in it. The business success that followed exceeded everyone's expectations, with the new shop becoming known throughout Madrid as a place where clients could receive excellent service in a comfortable environment where privacy was protected and personal relationships were valued. And the financial returns from Ronaldo's investment were reinvested in additional locations that employed more barbers and served more communities while maintaining the standards of service and discretion that had made the original shop successful. The scholarship program that Miguel established used profits from the expanded business to provide training opportunities for young people who wanted to learn barbering but couldn't afford the education costs that had become barriers to entry in many service professions. And the program's graduates went on to open their own shops or work in established businesses throughout Spain, creating a network of professionals who shared Miguel's commitment to quality service and ethical business practices that prioritized customer satisfaction and employee welfare over pure profit maximization. Years later, when Miguel had become one of Madrid's most successful barbershop owners and had been recognized by industry organizations for his contributions to professional education and community service, when the original crisis that had forced him to sleep in his shop seemed like a distant memory from a different life, he would credit Ronaldo not just with providing financial assistance, but with treating him as a complete person whose circumstances didn't define his worth or potential, and whose dignity was preserved even during the most difficult period of his life, because someone had chosen to help without judgment or conditions that would have made assistance feel like charity rather than investment in human potential that deserved support and recognition. The lesson that emerged from Miguel's story was that homelessness and housing insecurity affected people from all backgrounds and professions, that economic stability could be disrupted by circumstances beyond individual control, and that small investments in people who were facing temporary crises could generate enormous returns in terms of human dignity, community strength, and economic productivity that benefited everyone involved, while demonstrating that success should be measured not just by personal achievement, but by willingness to use resources and influence to help others overcome obstacles that prevented them from reaching their own potential for contribution and success.